here we are, talking about book 2 and 3 of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. You guys said that you got around to reading it, Ben, not as much. Yes, I believe
Yeah.
so.
Ben said, I think
Yes,
he read it, but quickly.
But quick.
I didn't get fully through it, and what I did read, I didn't really absorb.
Oh, that's fine. Some weeks be like that. That's fine. Can't be perfectly absorbing everything all the time.
Some of the time would be nice, at least.
Um, Generally speaking, I get the vibe from Marcus's writings that he's aiming for a person to be very even tempered and very neutral about most things. Is kind of what I get from a lot of this. And additionally, to not let the world or the circumstances around you dictate how you feel. To summarize, which I guess is stoicism.
Yeah.
And I am. I won't get into my dislike of previous readings. Just to say that I do feel like I am getting a much stronger sense of what is stoicism from these writings than the book we tried to read previously.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Very good choice.
Yeah. So I have enjoyed this book quite a bit. Ah, that's I. This is how mindful I'm being today. I was like, why is the audio capture being so weird? And it's using a microphone that was 3 feet away from me.
Ooh,
I
joy.
was, now you too can enjoy the Yeti mic sounds instead of my headset. I like my headset, but the audio quality is not as good on it. All right, so I highlighted some things here that I thought were interesting. I am satisfied. The person disobliging is of kin to me, and though we are not just of the same flesh and blood, yet our minds are nearly related, being both extracted from the deity. This is very elevated speech, I'll say. Very particular. But what I liked about it is it reflects some of the practice I've been really putting into motion for myself recently of trying to remind myself that I am not separate from my students or the people who frustrate me, who are quote unquote disobliging, you know? So I appreciated that. And I also highlighted in red here on my screen, no man can do me a real injury because no man can force me to misbehave myself. And so pretty much it was really ironic to me reading, not ironic, very coincidental. Reading through book 2 for me was very much a reflection of some stuff I've been trying to pull into my practice because so that my students don't arise in me an emotional reaction and I can react to them more objectively and with kindness, even when they are not being kind. And I like that he says, nor can I find in my heart to hate or to be angry with one of my own nature and family. And so I think that's interesting mindset to like take these people who you are disobliging with, as he puts it, or in not great straits, and to see them not only as the same as you, but as part of your nature and family. And that's kind of interesting to me, if I'm interpreting this correctly.
I'd say you are.
Did you have any thoughts, Lee?
Oh, I wanted to make sure I paused long enough there. I I think that that's pretty accurate. Just keeping in mind that we all come from the same place, and then knowing too the, I mean everything from the first chapter or first book rather
Mm-hmm.
that we read a couple weeks ago of seeing how everybody is connected and how he's very much of recognizing different people's strengths and learning from others, even in ways that seems like maybe he wasn't always as successful with adopting too, right? And
Yeah.
that sometimes I can't remember exactly. I thought there was some point in that earlier reading where he had said something about like not always being of the same mind as somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't always see it the same way, but that he's clearly one to make efforts to nonetheless try to understand where they're coming from and to recognize that the similarities underneath. And I mean, he seems to very focused on understanding all different kinds of people. And I mean, as an emperor, I would hope like this is essential, right? That he understands different kinds of people and
Yeah,
their
ideal
motives
situation
and
here.
yeah. So I definitely agree with the interpretation there.
Yeah.
And it's a very like it's focused on the self, the way that it's not, oh, I'm going to understand everybody and try to influence the world. Like some other things we read that talk about influencing others and the energy we're putting out, and he doesn't, although the things he's saying I think apply to that, but
Mm-hmm.
he seems very focused on controlling himself.
Yeah, I think you're right. He focuses on like these are the things we have that we can control. And I think he actually hits on that in his wording. I'm trying to remember exactly where of like a man only has XYZ to himself, right? Where he starts to get into now here it is. Now living and dying, honor and infamy, pleasure and pain, they're all the same, neither good nor bad. That's not actually it. But I also thought that was an interesting thought. It might be part
Number 2?
Might be number
I was
2.
saying it's like mind, body,
Yes.
or the flesh, breath, and the ruling part.
Yes. He says it a couple times in a couple different ways. But this idea that you only have this and you can control this and it's the only thing that should concern you. Effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But also profit, because he's an emperor and he talks about that. Profit is worth your time. Which I thought was funny. If I see it, I will point it out. I thought this was an interesting sentence. Cast away your thirst after them, that you may not die complaining, but go off in good humor. And he's referring to books in this instance. And I thought that was an interesting way to see it. Because I don't think he's opposed to learning. Like, he's a very educated man. But he seems to advocate for not striving for that education overly.
I kind of had the feeling that he was maybe talking about a specific trend or something that maybe we don't have the full information because, again, yeah, in the first book, he was very enthusiastic about having such a wonderful upbringing and education, and that private education was so much superior to what most people got. And
right,
what is this question of, okay, so people are thirsting after books, presumably for knowledge? I mean, it doesn't really sound like he was talking about fictional books here.
No, I don't think he's talking about fiction.
But is it philosophy? Is it something else? Is it this feeling that he had? Like, does he feel that often books only go so far and that they're not sufficient, and so people often are complaining and having, like, it's, I don't know, it must be that he had some kind of interaction with one or many people who were obsessed with this, either scholarly or something else, I don't know, that made him think, like, may not die complaining, so people who are thirsting after reading are always complaining and have bad humor and ungrateful. Because that last bit, hardly thank the gods for what you've had, so they're ungrateful and they're not. There must be specific kinds of books that some kind of trend, I would think, that's going on at this time that is really frustrating to him, because it just doesn't really make sense, even in context of the other things that he said, for it to be, all books or something, or all learning, as you said. I would like to know what this is about. I did not have time to go and find out.
So he spends like number 5 here, like really, I think, pushing for that evenness and not overly striving. He hit that a lot in book 1 though. If you keep clear of rashness and have nothing of insincerity and self-love to infect you, and do not complain of your destiny. One, I highlighted it because my name is Destiny, and so I'm always fond of seeing my name used. Beyond that, though, I do like that he's pushing for, ultimately, underneath the surface of this section is not putting yourself on a pedestal, I think, and thinking you're above anything.
Yep.
And so I appreciate those sentiments about what he's giving us. I highlighted this because it reminds me of how I felt about this week. This past week was, for some people are busy and yet do nothing. I sometimes feel like I have 100 things to do at work, but I'm accomplishing nothing. And so I wanted to spend some time considering if I'm doing that in my day-to-day, my personal life as well, you know, beyond work. Am I busy to be busy, or am I actually getting anything done? Because I do feel like I just wear myself out on things that I don't necessarily, in retrospect, think were important to fatigue myself on, you know?
Yeah, to add to that from that section,
Mm-hmm.
or I guess that's actually the same sentence, but the specific, it sometimes seems the most important things he says are just said in such a small, short way. Like, if you keep clear of rashness, so he's talking about being intentional and planning ahead, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this whole thing, having a greater purpose that you're striving toward, and not being self-absorbed in what you're doing. Do not complain of your destiny is very like duty, and maybe even a bit collectivist. I don't know if I would say the whole culture or his whole viewpoint is, but this again maybe comes with his station, but to be somebody who focuses on things that are actually going to have an impact and that are going to be like genuinely striving for a greater good, and that's back to virtue and all of that. But if you are doing everything in a way that you have planned ahead, that you know the goal that you're working toward, and that it is one that is aligned with your destiny, seems to be
Mm-hmm.
this idea that we have a duty to others, to the world, or to live in the words aren't coming so easily today for me, to live in harmony with nature, not, you know, not the way that we usually say nature, but the way that he means nature. And I think like a lot of this chapter, like this part, maybe maybe everything kind of points to that. This is an underlying current that he has of, you don't have long to live, you have to be intentional about what you're spending your time on, and that you have a duty to do it the right way. There is a right way to spend your time and a wrong way to spend your time. And then he's kind of just giving us details about how to do that throughout this chapter.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I like that in 11 he talks about things and realizing they don't have a quality of good or bad, which reminds me of meditation practice of not putting a quality on your emotions or thoughts as they arise, of like, I'm being bad, I have this thought going on, it's in my way, or overly attaching these qualities to things. And so I appreciated that parallel. And then I have personally, it's really been weird since the birth of my son. I've been back and forth a lot on my awareness of my mortality and even my fear of it to some degree. And so I highlighted this sentence because it reminds me of how I feel like I've stepped back in my practice because of it. Of now he that dreads the course of nature is a very child, but this is not only a work of nature, but is also profitable. So, like, where he's talking about this fear of death, because death is just a part of nature, and that to fear it is kind of ridiculous. I'm like trying to get there. Just embrace that this is the part of things that go and happen.
Acceptance.
It was interesting to me that he talked about, and I think this might have been a little bit about the area that I was thinking of what you were saying earlier, Lee, that whether we have 3,000, we have 300, 3,000, or 30,000 years to live, we just have this one life to lose. And the shortest lived persons come to die, their loss is equal. They can but lose the present as being the only thing they have. And he talks about the only thing a person has is this moment and who they are right now. And no matter how long they've had that or will have it. And I thought that was a very interesting insight. But then to allow ourselves to become vexed, tying back to kind of what I was thinking about with seeing myself as part of the same family and same nature as my students who are frustrating me, to allow myself that vexation is to separate myself from them and to separate myself from the nature of reality, which I thought was an interesting parallel that I'm seeing and what he's talking about with Stoicism. Well, would he have called it Stoicism? Probably not. When did that get a name? Sorry, tangent. When did it start getting called Stoicism?
I think he often says the philosophers, so maybe that was just being the prominent philosophical trend of the time. Maybe wasn't even. I would assume that they did have some kind of name, even if it wasn't Stoicism.
Yeah.
At the time. Well, wait, did it? We had a lot of quotes of Epictetus, right?
Yeah.
Before in the other reading, and did they say it in there at all?
Googling it.
That would be a clue. I think often in contrast
Zeno
to other
of Citium
philosophies.
coined it in 300 BCE.
Oh, wait. So that's a long time before this.
Nowhere does he refer to himself as a Stoic, though, in his writings, says Google.
Which kind of makes sense, too, because I think...
But he wrote before the term was coined. No, after the term was coined.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was during the Resurgence, yeah? So there was the original...
By 120
founding.
years or something. Yeah, something
No,
like
isn't it like 400 years?
If my Google search is correct, so it's not that the Stoicism wasn't around, but it's first going to be coined as Stoicism around 300 BC. And then Marcus Aurelius is born at 120 CE. So, oh yeah, you're right. It's 400 years. You're correct. Math!
Yeah, because they had the original ideas, and then it resurfaced and became popular. And so every time he's talking about the philosophers, I think often they're most of the time the Stoics, right?
Something like that.
But
yeah.
He doesn't seem to think of himself as one of them. But he also, in some parts, he's criticizing them harshly. In other parts, he's criticizing them in a very positive way of appreciating what they do and what he can learn from them. So I don't think he would call, although a lot of this thought, obviously reading too, related to Stoicism and that study, but I think some of this thought is coming from that, and some of it is coming from it just being like prominent at the time and many people accepting that this is just the way things are. But at the same time, I would not expect him to actually identify himself with them. I do want to point out before we move on, I didn't read book 3, so I don't know how far this goes into that. But from everything else that we've read so far, I come to think that as different as all these different philosophies and religions and cultures are, the texts that we find the most value in often say a lot of the same things. So we're
Yes.
reading this, which is so different from Buddhism and the Asian cultures that created or that Buddhism arose out of.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have a lot of parallel values and if you could say like paths
Yeah.
that he suggests that people should take, that people ought to live their life in a certain way, and it mirrors so much of Buddhism, which is it doesn't seem to be any kind of direct influence or even an indirect influence. I mean, I think we'd have to go pretty far out to find the way that Buddhism would have touched this, but yet he came to the same conclusions.
Yeah, I love that about what book clubs allowed me to do as far as explore these texts. Because, like you said, in the same way, they have all these same values. And so it's an inherent belief that I've had for many years of like truth tends to reveal itself regardless of the context you find it in. And so I think book club, in my hopes, in my deepest dreams, teaches people to be open to that truth regardless of its source. That the things that are helpful and meaningful will be so, even if we find them in a book that isn't about what we think we believe. And those are my thoughts on that.
I have the same wish.
I highlighted here that it concerns us, therefore, to push forward and make the most of our matters, for death is continually advancing, and besides that, our understanding sometimes dies before us. One, trying to accept the advancement of death as it comes for me. And to then additionally realize the ephemerality of my own beliefs, that they may too die and I may change my mind at any given moment.
Oh, that's interesting, because I thought he meant that, sometimes when people get old, your mind goes and you can't really be your full self. Like you're literally incapable of understanding.
Man, that's a good way to see it too.
That's also the way I interpreted it. That basically you get dementia or whatever, and your understanding leaves you. Yeah.
I think that's an incredibly valid way to interpret that sentence. It's just not how I had interpreted it when I first read it.
Yeah, just like your mind and your body both can expire, but not always at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think sometimes though, I don't know. I also thought of it as a more of a philosophical death of, even now, I'm so different than the person I was 5 years ago. My goodness. And that person in many ways has passed away and those beliefs have died, that understanding of that way of seeing the world is gone.
Very true.
And so that's also, I saw it. But I think what you said about the going of the mind is absolutely, yeah, that's valid. I highlighted this because it made me laugh. One thus prepared will be no less pleased to see the gaping jaws of living beasts than the imitations of painters and sculptors. I laughed at this because it reminds me tentatively of how my in-laws have been blessed with an amount of wealth. They are very standard middle-class white older people. And they have had the pleasure of traveling to every continent in the last few years, doing many a travel, seeing many a country. And they've sent me pictures. And I'm like, that's great. I never want to fly in a plane as long as you have. I am pleased with the photos I have gazed upon and hope to never go to Antarctica. No, thank you. I'm good. Anyway, that's probably not exactly what he's going for, but it amused me, and that was a parallel I saw in my own mind.
I think he was, yeah. It sounds like it is kind of that whole I keep going back to Buddhism, that if you really appreciate life and nature being this, the universe and godlike and all of that, but
Yeah.
that if you actually have that appreciation, you won't just look upon like the fine things that we have recreated, like paintings. You also will appreciate what actually lives and the full world around you.
Yeah.
And even something that might seem bad isn't. You should be able to appreciate that beauty. And yeah, and at the end admitting that, like, well, not everybody is going to see it this way, but only those who are truly in harmony with nature and it works. Like, this is something that is evidence that you've reached that point. If you can appreciate, what does he say, like the bending of an ear of corn, the brow of a lion, the foam of a boar, like they're not. It's like they're not beautiful, but they are. And if you can learn to see them that way.
It reminds me. So I'm from Oklahoma, which is not an amazing state. Nobody's got on their bucket list, I want to go see the plains and prairies of Oklahoma. But I remember briefly growing up and trying to appreciate what was beautiful about my home state. And even now, I have to consciously remind myself, which is a tangential thought. And I'm realizing as I'm speaking that maybe is not as tied in as I thought. But there you are.
No, I think it is. You maybe lost the trail.
I lost my thread a bit.
But it's that, you start taking things for granted, but they do still have some kind of inherent beauty, and
yeah,
somebody else will come and appreciate those things, the very things that maybe are boring and even irritating to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or, he's talking often about fear and like, yeah, but something that's commonplace, something that these small details that people maybe would overlook, but part of the mindfulness and presence and gratefulness and all of that I think that anecdote absolutely applies.
Yeah. Thank you. You're so good at words. Oh, I highlighted this because it also made me laugh. Because I think he's thinking about other countries, but I'd like to imagine he was thinking about other planets or parallel universes. If you happen to land upon another world, there will be gods enough to take care of you. I was amused when I read that. I had to stop reading for a moment and enjoy my amusement before I kept reading. As he continues to lay out this idea of stoicism, I kind of highlighted over here is kind of once again what I'm considering a very like encouragement of not having overly fluctuating emotions. And so he never minds he says he never minds other people's speech, thoughts, or actions unless public necessity and general good require it. No, he keeps himself to his own business and contemplates that portion of the whole allotted him by the fates, and endeavors to first as it should be, and believe that his lot is good. So generally, reading through this section of book 3, I'm gonna once again align it up with my circumstances. People, I don't know if you know this about educators in the education system, but teachers love gossip. They love it a lot. And it's always happening, especially in the teacher's lounge. And I sit in the teacher's lounge a lot, so I overhear a lot of things, and I began to reflect on some of the wisdom of not participating and just kind of staying in your own space Because, my goodness, does it look like sometimes that gossip makes people deeply unhappy?
That's right speech.
Yes.
Say, hi, baby! Hi, baby! Here you go, take it back. He's heavy.
I'm aware.
Alright, sorry, guys. I had to hold the baby momentarily. Oh yes. And so then to follow that thought, and he follows up this part, section 4 of book 3 of, and why indeed should he value the commendation of such people who are not able to even please themselves? Beyond the gossip, I once again think about my students. Some of them are very mean because I teach high school. Some of them are incredibly mean. They're unhappy. And sometimes it would be easy to let myself react emotionally and feel personally hurt by the things that they say to me. However, to kind of incorporate this same value system from the Stoics of why would I let them have any power over how I'm feeling when they themselves are clearly miserable, you know? And so I think I see that applicable to a lot of situations beyond just my interactions with the students, but also my actions with other teachers and even the administration at my position. Cool beans. You guys are so chatty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we really read this chapter, so we
Oh
probably have
yeah,
less
you
to
did
add.
it. That's right. Number
Can't believe-
5 didn't have a lot to say, except I really loved how he ended it of, in a word, never throw away your legs to stand upon crutches. And I was like, but what if my legs are broken?
Those aren't legs anymore.
Well, at that
Yeah,
point,
you've
you're not
already
broken
taken
away.
That's true. They're not. Do legs stop being legs if you can't walk on them?
I feel like yes, form follows function.
Scandalous.
They're not legs anymore. They're something else.
Oh,
Those are just appendages.
here's what I was saying earlier, Lee, is that now is profitable is best. Just some weird, random businessman thoughts coming in here.
Oh, wait,
I don't-
isn't that saying that a way
I
to
don't-
make the decision?
Mm-hmm.
I think profitable may not be related to profit
Oh.
here, to monetary profit,
Yeah, you're probably
But-
right.
but profitable in the sense that watering the good seeds.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. What's gonna nourish those seeds the best or the most? I think you're right.
There was a part a little bit earlier on. I think in the paragraph that you were talking about before, 5 maybe or something.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't highlight anything, but I thought it was funny. Just quickly seeing that where he was talking about taking into account other people's opinions and like influences from others, and
Mm-hmm.
there was something that he said that like not everyone's opinion is worth getting.
Yeah.
Like not everyone's opinion is actually worth anything at all. Only the people who are living in accordance with nature. So virtuous people are worth talking to and getting their opinions, and everybody else is not.
Yeah, I think that's that same vein of thought. It's like, okay, it's worth getting the opinion of people who've got their stuff together, who got their shit figured out, if you will. But why am I going to let a hot mess of a human being tell me how to live?
Yeah, that was his question at the end of that. Why, indeed, should he value the commendation of such people who are not even able to please themselves?
So, like, incorporating that same philosophy into my day has really helped alleviate some of my frustration with my students. Oh gosh, what is number 7 again? It's like for all his lifelong. Yeah, He just once again kind of like do the middle ground thing, kind of here. I don't know why I only highlighted do nothing rashly. Apparently, I had nothing else I thought was interesting on these pages.
He
Yeah,
said that like 3 times already.
he says that a lot. I really feel like he just emphasizes again and again not to like let yourself fluctuate in on the spectrum of emotion too much, and to kind of stay centered. If you will be governed by reason and manage what lies before you with industry, vigor, and temper, if you will not run after new distraction, but keep divinity pure, even as though you must at once render it up again. Your mind staunch, well disciplined. And then it's like a very long sentence. Number 12 is got a very long sentence that he summarizes with, "You will be a happy man." But then in 13, I highlighted this because I thought it was interesting to point out that Marcus does have a high reverence for the divine powers that be, whatever those are to him. And does push for a belief that if you're not in some way aligning yourself with the divine, that you probably aren't like holding it together very well. Oh, here we go. This is the thing I was thinking of. There are 3 things which belong to a man: body, soul, and mind. That was the thing I was thinking of way early when we were talking about like what we have for ourselves, and like focusing on you and what you have and what you can do, and not worrying so much about other people. Anyway, that was that conversation way earlier.
Yeah, I think it's the same concept. He's just brought it up multiple times. Maybe he'll keep bringing it up too.
Oh, I'm sure. These sorts of writings tend to bring up these ideas at least a few times in different ways, which is good because then I think they like sink in better.
Well, they're all interconnected, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to talk about one without bringing up the other and how it relates back. And
I think a
one
lot
leads
of
into the
topics are
next.
like that, though. Like, yeah. Let's see. Was there anything else I thought was... His distinction then lies in letting reason guide his practice. Yep. Generally enjoying Marcus Aurelius' writings. That's all I really have for that. I think it's got some interesting stuff. I'm enjoying Stoicism. I don't think personally, I'm not having any like overly conflicting emotions. Like, this doesn't fit with my practice. But I also don't tend to be a spiritual Buddhist of any flavor. But I do a lot of the practices of like meditation and stuff. Anybody else have thoughts?
That part on the last page that you highlighted, actually, like that pretty much to the end of the paragraph, I think is kind of, maybe that sounds sort of like his whole point. He's instructing what's the difference between like the common man in the sense of like all the other people and people who are really people who are doing it right. What are they like? And his distinction then lies in letting reason guide his practice, in contentment with all that is allotted him, keeping pure the divinity within him untroubled by a crowd of appearances, preserving it tranquil and obeying it as a god. He is all truth in his words and justice in his actions, and if the whole world should disbelieve his integrity, dispute his character, and question his happiness, he would neither take it ill in least, nor turn aside from that path that leads to the aim of life toward which he must move pure, calm, well prepared, and with perfect resignation in his fate. That I think everything points at that final description, and then we can see too how he, even from the very beginning, values these things, strives to be this kind of person, and clearly thinks that everyone else should be too.
Yeah.
They're not. He accepts they're not, but they should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think any well-intentioned belief system has similar feelings, right? Of, not everybody's like this, but you should definitely consider doing it. Max, you got any cool insights for us lurking underneath that Max brain?
I haven't drank my coffee yet, so sadly, no.
Oh no.
The daylight savings kind of blindsided me.
It blindsided me too, but differently. I was up anyway because creatures in my home do not allow me to sleep past a certain time.
This creature's baby?
And Cat, Milo is on a very strict schedule, and if I do not arise from the bed at that time to feed him, he will be very sad.
I see.
Cats are often very insistent on schedules and such.
He lives on a very strict schedule. He does not like very deviation from the schedule.
Shouldn't he have been an hour ahead today then?
He was. So I looked at my clock and said, "Oh, he let me sleep in. It's 7:30."
But he didn't.
But he did not. It was actually 6:30 in Catland.
Catland Dew. Does that count? Is that anything?